Glacier County, Montana, a lone search and rescue vehicle answers a child's distress call on New Year's Eve. Through the worst blizzard in decades, more calls follow, all from different locations, all impossible, all featuring children's cries. From the depths of my collection, the Nightmare Maestro brings you a tale that will make you question whether those desperate calls for help in the dark are truly from victims, or from something far more sinister. The digital thermometer on Jake Morrison's dashboard read -30 degrees Fahrenheit, but the wind chill made it feel closer to -60. Sheets of snow whipped across his windshield as the tracked rescue vehicle crawled through the Montana wilderness, its headlights barely penetrating the darkness ahead. The time on his radio display showed 11:45 p.m., 15 minutes until the new year. Not that anyone in Glacier County would be celebrating tonight, not in this monster of a storm that had shut down every road in a 100-mile radius. The memory surfaced unbidden, his first winter rescue, 10 years ago. Another New Year's Eve, another family caught in the cold. He'd followed protocol then, waiting for conditions to improve. By the time they reached the vehicle, the young mother had frozen to death, keeping her infant warm. The baby survived. Jake had held that child, felt its weak cry against his chest, and made a promise he'd kept ever since. Never wait if there's a chance. So when the call came in just minutes ago, 2 vehicles stranded on Highway 89, multiple people trapped, including children, Jake didn't hesitate. After 12 years with search and rescue, he knew the protocol by heart. In conditions this severe, with sustained winds over 70 miles per hour, they were supposed to wait it out. But protocol hadn't factored in the sound of desperation in the caller's voice, or the distant crying he'd heard in the background. The rescue vehicle's tracks crunched through the deepening snow as Jake checked his GPS coordinates again. Something about the call nagged at him, a detail he couldn't quite place. He'd been tracking incident reports from neighboring counties, noting a disturbing pattern of winter rescues gone wrong. Vehicles disappeared, rescuers vanished, cases went cold when spring thaw revealed empty cars stripped for parts. The beam of his headlights caught the reflective markers on the side of Highway 89, confirming he was still on course despite the whiteout conditions. The estimated arrival time kept climbing as his speed dropped, the vehicle fighting against strengthening winds that rocked even its reinforced frame. His radio crackled with intermittent updates from dispatch, breaking through the static and fragments between the storm's howling gusts. That's when his blood ran cold. Another unit was responding to a distress call with coordinates 15 miles away. Same report. Multiple people trapped, children involved. Before Jake could key his mic to respond, a third call came through. Then a fourth, all with different locations spread across the county. He reached for his radio to contact dispatch, but this time only static answered. The storm wasn't causing this interference. Someone was broadcasting on their frequency, using their codes, calling in false rescues across the county. They were spreading the rescue teams thin, drawing them out one by one into the whiteout. Jake's hand tightened on the wheel as he realized he'd walked right into their trap. Through the swirling snow, Jake caught a glimpse of approaching headlights. High beams, moving with unnatural speed for these treacherous conditions. His training kicked in as he calculated the physics. No vehicle should be able to maintain that velocity on these roads without sliding off into the drifts, unless its driver knew exactly what they were doing. The realization hit him like a spike of ice through his chest. The scattered distress calls weren't random. They matched perfectly with the incident reports he'd been studying obsessively since last winter, when his closest friend Mark disappeared during a routine rescue in North Dakota. The official report blamed the storm, but Jake had seen the photos from spring. Mark's rescue vehicle stripped methodically, every valuable part removed with surgical precision. 3 more rescuers vanished in North Dakota that same season, 2 in Idaho the year before. Each disappearance following the same pattern: severe storms, multiple simultaneous distress calls, and the haunting sound of children crying on the radio. The kind of detail that would make any rescuer break protocol, just as Jake had done tonight. A second set of headlights materialized in his rearview mirror, moving with the same predatory precision as the first. Jake's mind raced through the evidence he'd gathered: radio frequencies programmed to department channels, response times that suggested intimate knowledge of SAR protocols, and tire tracks that matched military-grade winter vehicles. These weren't opportunistic thieves. They were professionals who had turned rescue workers into prey. The approaching vehicles fanned out, attempting to flank him. Jake's rescue vehicle carried over $50,000 in medical equipment alone, not counting its specialized modifications for extreme weather operations. On the black market, its parts would fetch enough to fund months of operations. But the equipment wasn't their only target. They were hunting the rescuers themselves, eliminating witnesses who could expose their operation. The wind shifted momentarily, clearing visibility enough for Jake to spot more headlights converging from different directions. In the brief clarity, he caught a glimpse of one driver, a woman with stark white hair and a facial scar, wearing what looked like modified rescue gear. She moved with the fluid confidence of someone who had done this many times before, someone who enjoyed the hunt. Jake reached for the satellite phone, his last link to the outside world. The display showed no signal. Of course, they would have thought of that too. Out here in the howling white, he was completely alone with the predators who had already claimed so many of his fellow rescuers. The pursuing vehicles tightened their formation with practiced precision, herding Jake toward the canyon road. His hands gripped the steering wheel as memories from previous winter recoveries flashed through his mind: the sheer cliffs, the narrow passes, the places where even their best equipment couldn't reach. Perfect spots for staging accidents. He'd recovered enough vehicles from those depths to know how the reports would read. Unfortunate accident, severe weather conditions, driver error. Just like they'd written about Mark. Through gaps in the strengthening storm, Jake studied his pursuer's vehicle's modified military surplus Humvees with reinforced bumpers, specialized tires, and custom lighting rigs mounted on their roofs. The white-haired woman's vehicle led the pack, its oversized tires leaving distinctive treads that Jake recognized from photos of other crime scenes. These weren't just professionals, they were apex predators who had turned the winter wilderness into their hunting ground. The canyon road loomed ahead, its guardrails barely visible beneath accumulating snow. Jake's training screamed at him to avoid confined spaces, but the alternative meant facing multiple vehicles in open terrain. The rescue vehicle's superior traction would count for less if they could surround him. At least the canyon's walls might limit their ability to flank. As he entered the canyon, the wind's howl transformed into an eerie whistle between the rock faces. Jake caught fragments of radio chatter from his pursuers, coded phrases in multiple languages, military precision in their coordination. The white-haired woman's voice cut through the static, her accent suggesting Eastern European military training. She was directing the others with the calculated efficiency of someone who had refined their tactics through brutal experience. The headlights disappeared momentarily behind the first bend, and Jake used the respite to quickly access the vehicle's hidden compartment. Standard equipment included emergency flares, basic weapons, and survival gear, but it also contained something unofficial: a personal locator beacon, unauthorized, but kept for worst-case scenarios, like now, like Mark should have had. The headlights reappeared, closer this time. Their high beams reflected off the swirling snow, creating a disorienting strobe effect that triggered memories of recovered dash cam footage from other incidents. The same disorientation techniques used before each disappearance. They were trying to force him to make a mistake, to panic like the others had. The canyon walls pressed closer, and Jake's options dwindled with each passing moment. Ahead, through the curtain of white, a darker shape began to materialize. His heart sank as he recognized the outline of a jackknifed semi-truck, blocking the road, the perfect ambush point. Through his windshield, he could make out fresh tracks leading to the trailer's position. They hadn't just found this obstacle, they had placed it here, waiting for the storm that would bring them their next prey. The semi's trailer had been positioned at a precise angle, leaving only a narrow gap against the canyon wall. Too narrow for Jake's vehicle to squeeze through, but wide enough to taunt him with the illusion of escape. Behind him, the high beams drew closer, their light boxing him in like spotlights on a stage. The white-haired woman would want to savor this moment, the culmination of her carefully orchestrated trap. Jake's fingers found the locator beacon's activation switch as new details about the semi emerged through the swirling snow. No accumulation on its roof despite the ongoing storm. Fresh tire tracks leading to its current position, with distinctive patterns matching vehicles from other crime scenes. Boot prints in the snow military-grade winter tactical gear, the same type he'd found photographs of in Mark's research files. The pursuing vehicles killed their high beams simultaneously, plunging the canyon into darkness save for Jake's headlights illuminating the semi's trailer. The sudden absence of light sent his pulse racing as he recognized the tactic from Mark's notes. They were preparing for their signature move. Through his side mirrors, Jake watched dark figures emerging from the vehicles, moving with the fluid grace of predators who had rehearsed this choreography countless times. Years of rescue work had taught Jake to read situations through subtle details. The figures' movements suggested elite military training, possibly special forces. Their equipment visible now as his eyes adjusted looked custom-made for winter operations, incorporating stolen pieces from their previous victims. One figure carried what appeared to be Mark's tactical vest, modified with additional armor plating. The white-haired woman emerged last, her scarred face briefly illuminated by a flash of lightning. She carried herself with the authority of someone who had perfected her craft through years of successful hunts. In her hand, she held what looked like a department radio, probably taken from her first victim, kept as a trophy to lure others to their doom. The wind carried fragments of their coordination boots crunching through snow, metal clicking against metal, voices speaking in a mix of languages that suggested an international operation. They were positioning themselves with practiced efficiency, probably armed with more than just the tools needed to strip a vehicle. The North Dakota responders hadn't simply disappeared, they'd been eliminated as potential witnesses, their bodies hidden in places where winter would erase all evidence. Jake's thumb hovered over the beacon's switch when a new sound cut through the storm, the distinctive whine of a chainsaw starting up. In the brief silence that followed, he heard the white-haired woman laugh, a sound as cold as the storm itself. The message was clear. They weren't interested in waiting for him to surrender. This was the moment they lived for, when the prey realized all hope of escape was gone. The chainsaw's whine echoed off the canyon walls, distorting into something almost human like the desperate cries used to lure rescuers to their deaths. Jake pressed the beacon's switch, knowing the signal might never penetrate the storm. Through his windshield, he watched the white-haired woman directing her team with hand signals that spoke of military precision. His options had narrowed to a terrifying binary choice: die waiting or die fighting. A metallic scraping sound drew his attention to the semi's trailer. Something was moving in there, previously hidden by the swirling snow. The trailer's rear doors swung open, revealing a mobile workshop that confirmed his worst fears. Tools arranged with surgical precision, parts from other rescue vehicles still bearing department markings. A wall of photographs, trophies of their successful hunts, each showing vehicles and their operators' moments before they disappeared forever. Mark's face stared out from one of them, caught in the same trap Jake now faced. The hunter team spread out in a practiced formation, their black tactical gear blending with the storm. Jake counted 6 figures, each moving with lethal purpose. One carried Mark's modified rescue equipment, another wore a vest taken from the Idaho disappearances. Everything about them spoke of meticulous planning and countless successful hunts. Through his side mirror, Jake caught the white-haired woman retrieving something from her vehicle, a leather case that could only contain the specialized tools they used to disable rescue vehicle security systems. The chainsaw's growl grew closer as 2 hunters approached from both sides. Their leader moved with calculated patience, savoring the moment. Jake's headlights illuminated more details in the trailer-dried bloodstains on the floor, Personal effects sorted into evidence bags, department badges collected like trophies. Each item told a story of someone who died trying to save lives, their final moments preserved in this mobile monument to calculated cruelty. Jake's mind raced through his options, remembering Mark's last radio transmission. His friend had tried to reason with them, to appeal to whatever humanity might lurk behind their tactical gear. That approach had failed. The white-haired woman didn't want submission. She wanted the thrill of breaking someone who had dedicated their life to helping others, unless Jake changed the rules of their game. His hand moved to the rescue vehicle's custom modifications, specifically the experimental hydraulic system designed for clearing avalanche debris. They'd tested it last summer, discovering it could lift the vehicle's entire front end off the ground. Not exactly protocol, but neither was dying in a canyon during a manufactured emergency. The chainsaw's blade scraped against the driver's side door as Jake's fingers found the hydraulic controls. He had one chance to surprise them, to show these hunters that sometimes the prey remembers how to bite back. The wind seemed to hold its breath as Jake prepared to throw 12 years of cautious protocol into the howling storm. In the moment before he acted, he caught the white-haired woman's expression, changing the first flicker of uncertainty crossing her scarred face. The hydraulics screamed as Jake yanked the controls, launching the vehicle's front end upward with explosive force. Metal shrieked against metal as the chainsaw went flying, accompanied by a surprised cry that cut through the storm's howl. The vehicle's tracks caught purchase on the icy ground, allowing Jake to spin the rear end in a controlled arc that scattered the approaching figures like bowling pins. The white-haired woman's composed facade cracked as she watched her carefully orchestrated hunt dissolve into chaos. Her team scrambled for cover, their practiced formation breaking apart as Jake's rescue vehicle became a battering ram. Through his windshield, he watched one hunter slip on the ice, the man's tactical Mark's vest catching the light as he fell. The sight fueled Jake's rage, his hands steady on the controls as he pressed his advantage. Their leader barked orders in multiple languages, her voice carrying traces of multiple accents that revealed their operation's international scope. These hunters followed the winter storms across continents, not just state lines, moving with weather systems that concealed their work. But they'd never encountered prey that fought back with such calculated fury. Jake reversed hard, using the vehicle's weight to his advantage. The hunters dove for cover as their carefully planned ambush transformed into a desperate scramble. One figure slipped, falling into the rescue vehicle's path, a young man whose face showed the same military precision as his movements. Through the cracked windshield, Jake caught a glimpse of the radio unit on his belt standard department issue, probably taken from one of their first victims. The semi's trailer loomed ahead as Jake built up speed, aiming not for the narrow gap they'd left, but for the trailer itself. The rescue vehicle's reinforced frame had been designed to clear avalanche debris weighing tons. A thin aluminum trailer wall wouldn't stand a chance. The white-haired woman's eyes widened as she realized his intent, her hand reaching for a weapon that would prove useless against the armored beast bearing down on her operation. Gunshots cracked through the storm's howl, bullets pinging off the vehicle's shell in desperate attempts to stop the inevitable. Jake caught a final glimpse of the trophy wall in the trailer faces of the lost, staring out from their final moments. Then impact. The crash resonated through the canyon like an avalanche trigger, drowning out even the storm. The trailer's wall crumpled, its contents spilling across the snow-stripped parts, stolen equipment, and evidence of how many others had fallen into similar traps. Through the newly created exit, Jake caught sight of more headlights approaching from deeper in the canyon. The hunters had a second team waiting, ready to clean up any mess the first team created. They'd planned for every contingency, except the possibility that one of their targets would turn their own tactics against them. For the first time in what must have been years, the white-haired woman's scarred face showed something new. Fear. Jake gunned the engine through the shattered trailer, the rescue vehicle's tracks spraying a curtain of snow and debris that transformed into deadly shrapnel in the high winds. The hunters' backup team swerved wildly, their vehicles colliding in a spectacular display of panic as their carefully laid plan imploded. Through his cracked windshield, Jake glimpsed something he'd never expected to see: the white-haired woman's face contorted with genuine terror as she watched her empire of winter predation collapse. The locator beacon pulsed steadily on his dash, its signal growing stronger as he climbed out of the canyon. Wind-carved ice crystals pelted his windshield like buckshot as the rescue vehicle crested the ridge. The storm was intensifying, but now it worked in his favor, obscuring his escape while hampering his pursuers. In his mirrors, he watched the hunting team's formation dissolve into chaos, their vehicles spinning out as they attempted to maintain pursuit up the treacherous incline. His radio crackled to life, not with the hunters' false signals, but with genuine department chatter. The beacon's distress code had reached dispatch through a brief break in the storm. Multiple units were converging on his location, accompanied by state police who had been tracking similar equipment thefts across 3 states. Jake recognized his old friend Detective Sarah Chen's voice cutting through the static. She'd never stopped investigating Mark's disappearance. The hunter's vehicles appeared in his mirrors one last time, then scattered like wolves sensing a trap. The white-haired woman's vehicle lingered longest, and through the swirling snow, Jake caught her final gesture: a raised hand, both acknowledgement and warning. They would meet again. The winter storms would return, and with them, the hunters who had learned to use human compassion as their deadliest weapon. Spring thaw would reveal the fuller scope of their operation: specialized equipment cached in remote locations, makeshift chop shops hidden in abandoned buildings, and tragically, the remains of those who hadn't survived their encounters. But the hunters' greatest weapon, anonymity, was now compromised. Every emergency responder in the northern states would know their tactics, their patterns, their faces. The predators would become the prey. The digital thermometer still read -30 as Jake guided his battered vehicle back to base. Dawn was breaking over Glacier County, the storm beginning to weaken as his radio filled with the voices of approaching backup. He thought about Mark, about all the others who had died trying to save lives, and about the white-haired woman who had turned their compassion into a fatal weakness. She was still out there, probably already planning how to adapt, to evolve, to turn this setback into an advantage. But something fundamental had changed in the winter wilderness. The hunters' perfect record was broken. Their legend of invincibility shattered like the trailer wall. And in the growing light of New Year's morning, Jake made a new promise: next time, he wouldn't be the prey. He would be the hunter. If tonight's tale has you questioning every distant cry for help on stormy nights, remember the most dangerous predators are those who exploit our instinct to rescue others. Share your own winter emergency stories in the comments below, or tell us about times when your instincts warned you something wasn't quite right. Don't forget to subscribe to the Nightmare Maestro and hit that notification bell to ensure you never miss a chilling tale. After all, there are countless more stories where the real monsters wear uniforms of trust. Until next time, stay warm. And remember, not everyone coming to your rescue intends to save you.